Hello, my name is Brett Hill. I'm an anthropology professor at Hendrix College. Since the 1990s, I have been studying the decline of ancient civilizations in desert regions such as the Near East and the American Southwest. I've been interested in particular in human impact on ancient environments and what is broadly viewed as a concept of collapse. In recent years, I have focused on the Hohokam of southern Arizona, one of these societies that ostensibly disappeared in the mid-15th century AD. In my research, I have focused on things like agricultural technology, population, political organization, things like that, to try to understand if people degraded their environment so much that it caused hardships for their society and resulted in population decline and social collapse. Along the way in my research in Arizona, though, I got to know Native American people, in particular the O'odham people, who live today in southern Arizona and claim to be descended from the Hohokam. In fact, the word Hohokam comes from an O'odham word, Huhugam, which roughly means those who are gone. The term Hohokam has been adopted by archaeologists to refer to something quite different, to refer to material culture, to styles of pottery and architecture and things like that. In the course of doing this research, I really became interested in the differing views of archaeologists and descendant communities with regard to their understanding of the past and concepts like heritage and that sort of thing. I've recently published a book called From Huhugam to Hohokam, Heritage and Archaeology in the American Southwest. I encourage you to check that out. What I'm going to present here is a slideshow that I've given at a recent professional conference, and I will go ahead and load that slideshow up here and get started. All right. A path forward, Casa Grande as metaphor. The great house ruins, known singularly as the Casa Grande, have long meant different things to different people. Those meanings reflected beliefs about its builders and evolved as the destruction of the ruins grew more remote in time. Recovering meanings provides a compelling challenge, but one that offers opportunity for new meanings to emerge. Casa Grande is one of several metaphors in this story, and I argue that one of its meanings may be found in the man in the maze, or I'itoi Ki. The I'itoi Ki symbol is ubiquitous among the four southern tribes, appearing in important and sacred places, as well as more mundane. According to Elder Dorothy Lewis, it is used to teach children the meaning of life, and represents the individual's twisting and turning path of happiness and sadness toward a dream and the sun god's blessing at death. Elder Bernard Siqueiros likewise refers to a journey of life and emphasizes that everyone is on such a path, which leads to a center of peace and serenity. I'itoi Ki is more than just a symbol, though. It is also a place on the landscape. At the foot of tall cliffs at the base of Babakiveri Peak is a cave that also goes by that name. This cave does not obviously resemble the common labyrinth symbol, but access to this I'itoi Ki is up a 36 switchback trail, which rises 1,000 feet in a mile on a steep talus slope. At the foot of the cliff, one finds a narrow entrance into a small cave and shrine, where visitors have long left offerings and ask for blessings. Viewed in plan, this path lacks the intricate elaboration of a maze, but it is easy to imagine a common theme of arduous twisting and turning, concluding in a sacred inner chamber. If one understands it as a subjective experience rather than a plan view, the symbolic value of the maze is replaced by the metaphoric value of the path. The resemblance between the two I'itoi Ki is stronger from a phenomenological perspective, focusing on what it feels like to walk along this path, rather than how it appears in a visual representation. What does all this reveal about Casa Grande? Casa Grande has been an iconic symbol of ancient people in the Sonoran Desert for centuries. From the earliest Spanish records, it stood out as a singular monument in the region. Father Kino held mass there in 1697, and Juan Manje made the first drawing of the ruins. It is notable that he made both an elevation and plan view. It is difficult to know how accurate his elevation was because much has since fallen from the upper structure, but it is certain that he misunderstood the floor plan. Later generations of explorers always took time to visit and describe Casa Grande. It was special because it was the last standing great house. Many other great houses were found in the region, and some were reputed to be larger than Casa Grande, but it was unique in its architectural integrity. It became a symbol of all Hohokam great houses and soon became America's first prehistoric and cultural reserve, and then a national monument. Plan views of Casa Grande improved on Manhe's sketch with ever more detailed drawings, but it took 220 years to get it right. Pedro Font drew a much too symmetrical structure, and even though his plan of the great house is better than Manhe's, he introduced a doorway connecting the central room and the west room. Such a passage is not apparent today in the ground floor plan. Adolf Bandelier improved on Font's proportions and accuracy, but he also introduced a doorway between the east and south rooms where none is apparent today. This imagined layout, however, supported Frank Cushing's belief that there was a ritual pathway through Casa Grande, leading from the east entrance in a circuit through the north, west, and south, then returning to the east before entering the central room. As David Wilcox has noted, this circuit would not be possible because there is no doorway connecting the south and east rooms. Finally, in 1907, Jesse Fuchs got it right and produced the first scientifically accurate drawing of the ruins. Also in 1907, Fuchs published his analysis of a design pecked into the wall of the central room of the second story of Casa Grande. Autumn elder Thin Leather told him it was called Sivañĉī, but he called it instead a fictitious ruin. Fuchs noticed its similarity to another design shown to Juan Nentvig in 1764, when he asked his native guides about other buildings like Casa Grande. Nentvig called it a house of amusement. Neither Nentvig nor Fuchs acknowledged any significance in the drawing. Though Cushing seems to have misunderstood the ritual pathway, he had seen ritual pathways through native buildings, and it was a reasonable idea to consider. What if he was wrong only about the details? What would a ritual pathway through Casa Grande look like? If one entered from the east, where the chief was said to watch the sunrise, there would only be two options: pass straight to the central room or turn right. If one desired to pass through any other rooms before entering the central room, the path would necessarily return upon itself. Moreover, the path would be repeated on multiple floors, connected by ladders, through a distinctly labyrinthian design. This plan seems intended to structure movement in a complicated way. Such a recursive pathway looks suspiciously similar to designs seen by Nentvig and Fuchs, as well as to the contemporary ethnogenesis symbol. I propose that what Nentvig's guides were describing was not an architectural drawing as he expected, but the experience of moving through such a building. This interpretation presents a subjective understanding and emphasizes the feeling of movement and mystery rather than the appearance of a building. Lakoff and Johnson might call it an orientational metaphor for life. This interpretation potentially connects the central symbol of O'odham identity to the most iconic structure in the region at least 2.5 centuries ago. This interpretation does not establish who built Casa Grande, whose meaning has changed over time. Further mysteries lurk in the fact that many of Casa Grande's doors were closed off and remodeled in different periods, altering access to different rooms and changing whatever pathways may once have existed. But it does potentially link O'odham to the Great House in a significant way for a long time. Interpretations like this are intriguing and command the attention of anthropologists, but they strain falsifiability on at least two fronts. It would be impossible to disprove that I'itoiki ever referred to a ritual pathway through Casa Grande, and it would be impossible to prevent it from ever meaning that in the future. As perilous as it is, though, the potential gain is equally enticing. The possibility of reviving a lost idea or resolving a past misunderstanding is tempting, but it also raises ethical questions. Who is served by interpretations of the past, and how are the benefits, rights, and harms of interpretation distributed? Cultural sovereignty and the authority of descendant communities over how their heritage is produced and disseminated must be recognized. Ultimately, it is not my place to say what these things mean to others, certainly not Thin Leather. At the same time, I am an anthropologist, and that comes with a belief in our common humanity. Studies of ancient collapse have always been justified by lessons for the future. Likewise, as David Martinez argues, heritage doesn't only happen in the past. It involves the future as well when applied to prescriptions for living in balance with the land. I hope that the value of understanding something from the autumn past may be shared more broadly if it is seen to be wise. I will reserve my discussion to lessons for anthropology, which I argue derive from a subjective perspective on heritage and its implications for us all. Thus, I propose this pathway as a metaphor for the ongoing twists and turns of constructive dialogue. Martinez argues that Native people do not need archaeology, and that the future of the Huhugam is to reaffirm the values of ancestors to their descendants. I hope they do that well, but I also hope that anthropologists can share in these valuable lessons. Roger Echo Hawk once wondered what would happen if archaeologists began to work in full partnership with Indians. Michael Wilcox called it a tectonic shift when they did so. In Arizona, the new century has produced many examples of research programs designed to improve collaboration among native and non-native in heritage and archaeology. Working with more diverse premises and data, these projects have been fountains of insight. Working with lesser known materials and sites on tribal lands, archaeologists add complexity to models of demography, hydrology, and cultural landscape. Working with elders and oral traditions, they produce more personal senses of heritage and connection among descendant communities. Working from a premise of continuity among present and ancient peoples, they reveal that concepts like adaptation, collapse, and even significance are more complicated than once imagined. Scholars historically dismissed Native accounts of the past as unreliable and misleading. But one of the most significant developments in Hohokam archaeology over the last 20 years has been that collaboration among Native and non-Native has been intellectually stimulating and produced no visible signs of decline in the field. Furthermore, archaeologists have discovered that our understanding of Hohokam corresponds well with what Native people have been saying all along. On the continuity question, are the O'odham descended from the Hohokam? First, let us dispense with the idea of O'odham uncertainty about their ancestry. I believe that idea is an historical misunderstanding and that O'odham have a coherent understanding of their relationships with ancestors and the land. Furthermore, we can argue with high confidence that they are descended from the Hohokam in precisely the way that they mean it. Everyone has 2 parents, 4 grandparents, etc., and an exponential growth that results in each one today having millions of ancestors living when Casa Grande was built. These were not all individual people, but relationships of descent. And the reason the 2 numbers are not equal is because lineages are folded over and over in consanguineal mating. This mating is structured largely by place, among neighbors. Anyone whose descent is traced back more than 3 centuries in the Sonoran Desert is likely descended from people living in the same place centuries earlier through these millions of relationships. Many culturally variable groups of people pass through the region, and one of the most common themes in O'odham heritage is the ubiquity of intermarriage. An even larger theme is on the importance of children and grandchildren and their diverse relationships of descent. Even simple rate estimates are extraordinary in their implications. If P is percentage of endogamous marriage and X the number of generations, then P to the X is the percentage of unmixed descendants remaining through time. It is difficult to know how frequently intermarriage occurred in the past, but even if only 1 marriage in 10 were exogamous, more than 90% of their descendants would be of mixed ancestry in the time since Casa Grande was last occupied. The Pew Research Center indicates today more than half of Native American marriages are with people of different races. Rates of intermarriage undoubtedly varied in time and place, but during periods of migration and upheaval, they probably increased. It seems very likely that most Native people whose ancestors passed through this region since Casa Grande was occupied can count among their ancestors someone whom archaeologists would call Hohokam. This likelihood seems greatest for O'odham, who have inhabited the region since that time. All of those relationships took place somewhere, and for O'odham, that was the Sonoran Desert. The second important point to take from Native accounts of the past regards its shape. Hohokam heritage is filled with themes of division and reemergence among countless different identity groups, related to one another in continuous waves across the landscape and across generations. Groups are continually joined and left behind in a view of heritage that is compatible with contemporary archaeological views, which describe a multi-ethnic composite, including groups with connections throughout the region. Archaeologists today find fluid patterns of migration, diaspora, and return, which bear striking resemblance to those described by native authors for generations. Genomic analyses worldwide reveal the biology of an unending intersection of ancient populations in a braided stream of relationships. The braided stream, or rhyzotic model of ethnogenesis, recognizes that each human society and culture is built from elements derived from two or more antecedent societies. The Hohokam derived from multiple antecedent societies who moved through the area, but it seems noteworthy that the Huhugam core of the lower Salt and middle Gila River valleys is located at the intersection of cultural and geographical zones. It was long recognized as the frontier between the Pimeria and the Apacheria. The Spanish avoided it for nearly 3 centuries, and it was once the boundary between the US and Mexico. It was also a boundary zone between the Sonoran Desert and uplands to the northeast. And it was a boundary zone between language groups at the northern edge of the Tepiman corridor. Hohokam must have been in ways a border place where more cosmopolitan interests were reflected in distinctive material culture. The disappearance of the Hohokam was in part a breakdown in the peaceful interactions between people from different places, such as that modeled by social network analysis. In the braided stream metaphor, these groups are imagined as different channels merging and diverging, and perspective is from outside the stream, in an objective position. Viewed in plan, though, maps of social networks in space resemble fragmentary cross-sections of a braided stream, snapshots of relationships that divide and remerge through time. The connections modeled by similarities in pottery type are not quite complete models of ethnogenesis, but they may be its rivulets. Similar analyses of relationships with neighbors to the west and south should be interesting. There were also relationships in those directions, but from a distance, they do not look quite like the ones to the northeast. Salado pottery made social network analyses possible in that direction, but material culture connections in other directions are not as clear. When they do occur, they seem to make a curious leap over a gap to the south. In conclusion, categories like Hohokam have long resisted precision as units of social reality, but they linger as convenient units of discourse and continue to permeate popular understanding. Variations in meaning lead to different understandings of what lessons they offer. But one meaning they offer everyone is on the magnitude and diversity of all human heritage. It is grounds for optimism that archaeologists and native people find convergence in how to imagine this diversity. Human classification and division rank among humankind's greatest threats, and recognizing what we share is at least as important as what divides us. Thank you, and thank you to the many people who helped support this research. So I hope that that was helpful. This research has been posted on ResearchGate. If you're interested in reading it, you can find it there under my name, James Brett Hill, J. Brett Hill. You can find the paper there. And other than that, thank you for listening, and I hope that I get to meet you all someday.